Hey gang, it's Squill, and Princess Bubblegum is a character that the internet is totally normal about. Nah, but for real, Bonnabelle Bubblegum is easily Adventure Time's most divisive character. Depending on who you ask, she's either an irredeemable monster, or a complete saint capable of doing nothing wrong. Your Honor, my client was simply girlbossing. But with a character as complex and in as many episodes as PB, I feel as though she's a bit more complicated than that. My goal for this video is to look into PB's character as objectively as possible to try and determine where she morally aligns. And I think the best place to start here would be to look at her past. About 800 years before they started the series, Bonnie was born from the Mother Gum alongside her brother Nettie. Nettie was born terrified of the world around him, which left it all to Bonnie to take care of him. For the first few years of their lives, Bonnie and Nettie were basically all each other had. From basically the instant she was born, Bonnie was psychologically conditioned to always be taking care of her people. Bonnie's need to protect Nettie is where a lot of her actions later on in the series will stem from. But alongside her brother, Bonnie also needed to raise herself. Again, it was just Bonnie and Nettie when they were born. She had no form of parental guidance. Nettie had Bonnie to protect him, but Bonnie had no one. I mean, let's compare her to Marceline for a second. Another immortal character who starts off the series very morally gray. But Marcy at least had her mother for her early years and then Simon for most of her childhood. Not only someone to take care of her, but also instill moral values in her. And most of her actual issues stem from the fact that those people abandoned her. We all know what a version of Marceline who grew up with the wrong father figure looks like. But for the most part, Bonnie had no one. Everything she knows she had to teach herself. And the few people she did have ended up betraying her, leaving her with even more people she needs to take care of. And in fact, I'm sure Bonnie's experience with her Uncle Gumball instilled a lot of trust issues in her. It probably made her feel as though she needs to have her eyes on everyone just in case they're plotting against her. From here on, Bonnabelle, now known as Princess Bubblegum, likely devoted most of her time to fulfilling her uncle's plan and building up the Candy Kingdom. We do know that she was in a relationship with Marceline at one point. However, PB's dedication to her kingdom was one of the biggest factors in them breaking up. Much like her Uncle Gumball, PB's friendship with Shoko is likely another contributing factor as far as her trust issues go. Not only did PB and Shoko form a clear bond with each other, but Shoko was likely also someone PB could relate to, having to basically raise herself due to her neglectful family. So when Shoko betrayed her, she must have been heartbroken. Between Gumball, Marceline, and Shoko, it's clear that it was always tough for PB to form meaningful connections with other intelligent people. This likely explains why she made the Candy people as dumb as they are. Because if they were smarter, then they'd be more likely to betray her. And the few times she would create a citizen with intelligence, it ended up backfiring. The Rattleballs were too violent, and Goliad abused her powers. The only real exception here is Peppermint Butler, who is pretty consistently by PB's side throughout the series. But even Peppa can get up to some pretty shady stuff. And for the record, I don't bring all this up as an attempt to excuse all of PB's actions in the present day. But I do think that this context is important. Much like the rest of us, PB would be a very different person nowadays if she grew up under different circumstances. But speaking of which, let's explore modern day PB, and whether or not she's truly as bad as the internet makes her out to be. Responsibility demands sacrifice. If I were to choose one quote to represent PB, this would be it. PB cares about her kingdom and her people more than anything else in the world. But PB's devotion to her people often comes at the cost of her own mental health. One of the earliest examples of this is in Too Young, a story that directly follows up on the events of Mortal Folly and Mortal Recoil, in which PB is turned 13 again. This allows her to live a more carefree lifestyle that she couldn't as an adult. It feels so different just watching Bonnie have fun. That's not something she often gets to do as an adult. And it becomes so much more effective when you remember that this is the childhood that PB never had. This is probably the first time in her entire life she's had absolutely no responsibilities, no obligations to fulfill. But when Lemong Grab takes control of the kingdom and she has no other options, she sacrifices it all just to be there for her people. I briefly mentioned it before, but PB's relationship with Marcy is another good example of this. Based on her breakup song Woke Up, we can tell that Marceline was probably feeling some amount of jealousy towards the kingdom. That she was spending so much time on her kingdom that she neglected their relationship. You can also see this a bit in I'm Just Your Problem when Marcy compares herself to PB's subjects. PB clearly sacrificed the relationship she had with Marcy for the sake of her own responsibilities. The Pajama War is one of the first episodes since Too Young to really let PB let loose. She even opens up to Finn a little bit about how exhausting her responsibilities can be. It's so wholesome just watching Finn and PB hang out. Unfortunately, the longer PB stays away from her kingdom, the more it continues to devolve. Not a ton of emphasis is put on it, but it is quietly sad how dependent the candy people are on PB. How even just leaving them alone for 10 minutes will cause them to devolve into chaos. And these are the people she's had to deal with for hundreds of years. That must be exhausting. And this all comes to a head when PB is dethroned by the King of Ew. I'm gonna talk a bit more about this arc later on in the video, but for right now, I just want to take note of how much happier PB seems to be without being in charge of her kingdom. I mean, at first she's understandably pissed, and it takes her a bit to readjust. But once she gets used to it, she seems to enjoy life without her candy kingdom. So we know that ruling her people for so long clearly stressed PB out, but what did she actually do as leader? One of PB's biggest character traits is her need for control. She has to have her eyes on everyone, likely stemming from her trust issues. One of the most clear examples of this is in Goliad. In this episode, PB creates Goliad, an heir to her throne in case she were to ever die. Goliad is clearly stated to contain PB's DNA. Now, it's not like Goliad is a clone of PB, she's obviously a different person, however she does clearly represent PB's control issues. I mean, she literally mind controls the candy people into doing her bidding. This is clearly symbolic of how PB made her people intentionally stupid so that they don't question her leadership. Of course, some candy people still question her anyways, but for the most part, the Candy Kingdom is relatively obedient towards PB. Not to mention the extreme surveillance that PB has over the kingdom, watching her people's every move. It's clear that she does this out of her fear of someone betraying her again, but it's still pretty messed up. Now, obviously PB wouldn't literally mind control her people like Goliad did, but it's easy to see where that personality trait stems from. However, PB's need for control is not limited to her own kingdom. About 15 years before the start of the series, PB finds a baby flame princess after she's been abandoned by the Flame King. She tells the Flame King to find some way to contain Flame Princess's powers or she will, thus leading to Flame Princess being locked up for most of her childhood. Now, in PB's defense here, it's not like she actively asked to have Phoebe locked up. The Flame King could have contained her power in a different way. But it's also not like she does anything to stop Phoebe from being locked up, and she clearly knew about it based on the line in Burning Low. And in the present day, we see PB take control over Flame Princess in other ways, such as trying to convince Finn not to date her. To be fair, this is a genuine safety concern. FP is dangerous. However, they still could've, and did, come to some sort of a compromise. And PB's unethical treatment of Flame Princess is expanded upon even further after her and Finn's breakup in Earth and Water, where she is seen recording and taking notes on Flame Princess without her consent. She then begins to do some testing on her to try and cut FP off from her emotional state. Flame Princess does agree to this, and it's not like we know exactly what this test would have done, but it definitely feels sketchy, like it's just another way for PB to subjugate Phoebe's powers, and not as though she actually cares about her. And this all comes to a head in the cooler, easily PB's lowest point in the entire series. In this episode, PB gets Ice King to cool down the Flame Kingdom so that she can get in and sabotage the Fire Giants. PB disabling the Fire Giants is in and of itself pretty messed up considering they're an ancient royal lineage. I at least understand her reasoning of not wanting to risk the chances of her kingdom being attacked. But in cooling down the Flame Kingdom, many innocent citizens are hurt and even killed. In a cruel sense of irony, while trying to protect her own citizens, PB brought harm onto Flame Princesses. Flame Princess does forgive Bubblegum, and Bubblegum lets her keep the last remaining fire giant. However, it's clear the two are still on awkward terms. And if you want one last example of PB's control issues, look at none other than Lemong Grab and Lemon Hope. It makes sense that PB would feel an obligation towards Lemong Grab considering she did create him. But man, it's like every time she intervenes, things just get worse. Uh-oh, Lemong Grab is intruding upon the candy people because he's lonely. I know, let's send a few candy people to live with him. Uh-oh, Lemong Grab is abusing said candy people. I know, let's create a new Lemong Grab instead. Uh-oh, PB accidentally left the recipe to creating candy life at Lemong Grab's castle, and now they've used it to create even more Lemong Grab citizens that they're unable to take care of. I know, let's just erase the recipe from their minds. Uh-oh, now that they can't create any more citizens, the first Lemong Grab has started oppressing the second Lemong Grab and all of their already existing citizens. I know, we'll save the child Lemon Hope and have him go back for the others later. Uh-oh, now the big Lemong Grab has established a totalitarian dictatorship after his citizens helped free Lemon Hope. Now, I'm not saying any of this was directly PB's fault. Like, there's no way PB could have known that any of this would happen. But I do still think that Lemong Grab's arc shows off the downsides of PB's controlling nature. Every time she involves herself in Lemong Grab affairs, things just get more and more chaotic. The only time Lemong Grab shows signs of actual improvement is when PB is out of the picture entirely. PB definitely had good intentions in trying to help the Lemong Grabs, but she probably should have just kept well enough alone. But perhaps an even better example of this is Lemon Hope. Now, I get there's not much PB herself can do about Lemong Grab, considering all the pacts and treaties. But goddamn P-Bubs, trying to get a child to solve this conflict, the child you just helped escape from Castle Lemong Grab, and likely has some leftover trauma from that experience. And ironically enough, PB's insistence that Lemon Hope has to rescue his family ends up briefly pushing him away from the ordeal altogether. And while Lemon Hope does eventually come back to beat Lemong Grab, he also rejects PB's offer to be the Lemon People's champion, much to her own surprise. I do wonder if perhaps this is an example of PB projecting her own sense of responsibility she felt as a child onto Lemon Hope. But regardless, this experience helped show PB the importance of individuality and letting people be free to make their own choices. The last aspect of PB's character I want to touch upon in this section is her hubris. PB has a pretty big ego, likely stemming from the fact that she is one of the smartest people in all of OO. But this ego can definitely come into conflict with others, as shown in multiple episodes. One of the best examples of this is Wizards Only Fools. In this episode, PB goes with Finn and Jake to Wizard City to try and retrieve a spell to help with Starchy's cold. However, being a woman of science, PB rejects the notion that magic is real. This gets her in trouble with Wizard City law. All PB has to do here is say Wizards rule and she'll be free, but she just can't brain herself. She's just so damn stubborn, so headset in her beliefs. She can't even entertain the idea of validating magic users even under the threat of imprisonment. Princess Cookie is another great episode to show off PB's stubbornness. PB is definitely right to be mad at Baby Snaps to some degree, keeping candy people hostage unless she gives him her crown. But geez, Bonnabelle, dungeon for life? The story does a good job showcasing the ways in which PB will force her will upon others. First with Jake by making him be a milkman instead of a mailman, and then with Baby Snaps by laughing at his dream of becoming a princess. Which, intentional or not, it would mess him up for the rest of his life. I mean, even upon hearing that he'll let the hostages go, she just can't bring herself to let him off the hook. She does eventually change her mind off-screen, But that's only after an attempted suicide. But possibly the craziest episode to involve PB's hubris is Apple Wedding. In this episode, PB is so pissed that Tree Trunks is having King of Ooh perform her wedding ceremony instead of her, that she breaks into his blimp to try and find dirt on him and proceeds to hijack Tree Trunks' wedding just to present said dirt. Geez, we got a regular Mordecai over here. And then, when it turns out her evidence is wrong, she locks him up anyways alongside everyone else at the wedding. She does let them go not too long after, but goddamn. PB would rather unfairly imprison people than admit that she was wrong. I could sit here and tell you that all of this evidence makes PB a bad person, but that would only be telling half the story. Let's see what happens when PB is humbled. Not too long ago, I discussed the Cooler, and how it's easily PB's most unflattering portrayal in the entire series. But what I didn't really discuss before was how the episode ended, in which Flame Princess calls PB out for being a bad person. This seems to get through to PB, as not only does she allow Flame Princess to keep the last fighter giant, but she also cuts the cord on all of her cameras, thus giving up some of her control over not only the Flame Kingdom, but also her own. So while this episode showcases PB at her worst, it's also what I consider to be the start of her redemption. The following episode, The Pajama War, sees PB putting this new mentality into practice. Here, she allows herself to take some time away from the candy people to let them figure things out for themselves. It doesn't exactly go well, but the fact that PB allowed this at all is a solid step in the right direction. However, the real change occurs when PB is dethroned by the King of Ooh. Getting to restart without her candy people allows PB to clear her head a little. Particularly, the episode Varmints allows PB to open up to Marceline in a way she wouldn't have been able to before. PB is almost never this vulnerable, letting Marcy know just how much pain she feels after losing her kingdom, as well as how exhausted she's been trying to keep it all together for so long. And this experience is what helps PB rekindle her relationship with Marceline. And just in time to help Marcy out in stakes when she doesn't want to be a vampire anymore. Here, she actually acknowledges her own hubris and how it's gotten in the way of other people. When the candy people realize how much they miss being under a ruler who actually cares about them, they stage a coup against King of Ooh, thus allowing PB to rule again, but now with more empathy for others. The Thin Yellow Line is the first episode to really show off just how much PB's changed after being dethroned. In this episode, when a banana guard is caught vandalizing Candy Kingdom property, PB sends Finn and Jake in to find out who it was. But instead of chastising him for speaking against her, she rewards him for his talent and creativity. She is actively celebrating the individuality of her people, a far cry from the version of PB we had just a couple seasons ago. In Broke His Crown, she once again lets herself spend some time away from the kingdom in order to hang out with Marcy and Ice King. Of course, this is still hard for her to adjust to, but she's making an effort. But one of the best episodes of the later seasons to show off PB's development is High Strangeness. This episode acts as a sort of spiritual sequel to Apple Wedding. In it, PB sends some new candy people to populate an area in space just in case something bad happens to her kingdom. What she doesn't know, however, is that this area is already populated by Tree Trunks' alien family, and that PB is harming them by sending candy people up there. But when Tree Trunks shows PB what's going on, not only does she send her people back, but she lets Tree Trunks help her find a new home for them. PB letting go of her hubris and putting other people above her own citizens is a great sign of character development for her. In general, there's just a more relaxed feeling to PB's character post-stakes. She feels less controlling and much more willing to let loose and have fun a little bit. And by the time of Obsidian, she's not even living in her kingdom, living the domestic life with Marcy instead. And by the time of Together Again, she's relinquished control of the kingdom entirely to Peppermint Butler, the perfect decision for her character. So, where exactly does PB land morality-wise? I definitely think it's fair to call her morally gray throughout a good majority of the show. The thing about PB is that I think he very rarely actually wants to hurt someone. Most of the bad things we see PB do across the series are done for the greater good of her kingdom. This doesn't justify any of the bad things PB does, but I do think it's a little dishonest when people act like she's this evil dictator. PB is such a nuanced and well-written character. I feel like it does her a disservice to just boil her down to good or evil. She's way more complicated than that. Despite this, I do think it's fair to call her a good person by the end of the series, as we see her work on every major character flaw of hers. Her hubris, her control issues, her workaholic tendencies. I especially love how Obsidian implies even more character development for her off-screen. She didn't just stop growing after the original series. I really do hope we get another PB-focused story sometime. She's easily one of Adventure Time's most compelling characters. Please let me know your thoughts on Princess Bubblegum in the comments. Just, please be civil down there. I admit, this is a video idea I've had for a while now, but kept putting off due to being worried about the response I'd get. There's just something about PB as a character that people get so damn heated about. You can't have a normal discussion about her online. What I'm saying is that if this video blows up, please be normal about it. Have a good one. Squill out.